Okay, the devlogs dropped about a few hours ago at time of writing and a few hours ago at time of recording as well. And there is a lot to go through here. We have updates on the music, on the art, on translation, on some side projects, the whole shebang. Also, we now know that while the prologue was 37,000 words, chapter 1 is projected to be over 100,000. Also, I'm there. That's me. Shit's awesome. To the max, like what the hell? And like, damn. It really has been only a couple of weeks since I uploaded that video. It felt like I uploaded it last year, mainly because I've been busy getting my grades, also writing for some of the fangas that I write for, which I do write for, yeah, I'm surprised too. Go check out the Uzuji... Fuck. Go check out Tum and M:SS, how the f you pronounce that. Anyway, not much to really comment on for the bulk of it. I'm not in the business of analyzing workflow and productivity, at least not for free. Feel free to DM me. Anyway, we have a teaser for chapter 1, so enough showboating, let's get to work. The first thing we're treated to with this teaser, aside from a disclaimer, is a series of TVs, with the prologue being played on all of them. What is notable is the sheer number of them, and despite their number, how little difference they have between them. At most, only 3 different perspectives or different points are visible across the plethora of displays. I'm not going to read into it too much, but it really gives off a restricting, narrow aura, so to speak. There's also how it begins and ends. Cassidy introducing herself is the central focus of the displays, and when it ends, we're again dragged back in, greeted by the logo of this game. While some may directly say this shows Cassidy is a shoo-in for dying, I see it as being more representative of her character and motivations being central, figuratively and literally, with the displays to the events of chapter 1. There is also the TV effect present. For those out of the loop, older descriptions of this game drew attention to it being broadcasted and the students being informed of it. Now, while these have been scrubbed clean off the face of the earth, I'd assumed it was no longer relevant to the story. However, now I believe we can see that the broadcasting aspect is still part of this plot. Rather than being told straight up that they're being seen by the public, the game may be broadcasted in secret, perhaps to only a few people, or perhaps to the world. I've highlighted this in my overarching prologue analysis, but it makes sense if you believe that this game is meant to highlight the true face of talent, or destroy the reputation of the UTP. After that, we see Taco and Panic's signatures. Nothing special. And then we see the title of chapter 1. Something very special. Now, I know a lot of people are jumping the gun here, you know who you are, and saying this highlights that the class are secretly hypocrites or some characters are guaranteed to die. But take a second to actually understand what it means. A veil of hypocrisy less so implies and more so tells you outright that whoever is being described has already put up a noticeable cover of hypocrisy. In describing what is beneath this metaphorical veil, it alludes to it being removed. Now, I hope you were paying attention to the prologue, because there is a very hypocritical blondie in there. I believe this chapter title alludes to the idea of Damon having to peel away his hypocritical views of talent in order to connect with others, out of necessity. As already seen, he's felt an obligation to solve Kira's murder, and he's already displayed a penchant for more emotional arguments with him backing up Akire based on his credentials. In order to continue being able to use pathos as an argumentative tool, he must be able to connect with others. Akire's time as a lawyer was an emotional argument because they knew nothing about each other than their titles during the prologue. This will not be the case throughout the first chapter as they grow used to each other, until one of them is killed. On this note, I'd like to introduce the idea that Nullz presented, that each chapter title describes Damon. I think this is right on the money, thanks Nullz. But more specifically, it describes the relationship between Damon and the Ultimates. The prologue's title, to summarize, represents the vows the students make at the end of the prologue, how Damon is excluded. However, it also shows how the promise made not to kill is ultimately flimsy, giving the impression of amateur stitchwork waiting to fall apart. As such, I believe the title refers to this veil stitched together in the prologue, one that is undeniably hypercritical on how much trust it places in Ultimates while embossing those such as Eva. How underneath this promise not to kill, the cast has next to nothing in common aside from all being Ultimates. Okay, enough with the title. Now let's look at the areas we see presented before us. I know some people like to believe that these could be execution grounds, but I really see them as being a new area we've unlocked, where there are 4 doors and ergo areas to unlock in the tree room. We know there is an exterior to this school that could serve as the 5th unlocked area. Furthermore, it would make sense. There isn't much of note to find in the current accessible area, they're all decrepit reminders of the past or basic amenities. And given that the cast has already finished a trial, I wouldn't be surprised if Tozu opens up a new area to establish the connection of new areas and survival to the students. As for the aesthetics, it really does play into the idea of this school being old and abandoned, being given a second breath of life or death by the masterminds. This is especially apparent upon seeing the one piece of modern technology having the Eden's Garden Academy logo plastered right onto it. Also, I can't lie, they really remind me of the Left 4 Dead safe room. Also, thanks to Null Game for reminding me, but the title is also worth considering. Irrevocable Echoes of Impulsion to me symbolizes how easy it is to kill and yet how final that act is. The anger or fear or impulse to defend or attack can result in your hands being bloodied, and in you being executed or having to be responsible for the death of the whole class to survive. To me, it shows that the murderer of Chapter 1 didn't plan their murder, but had it occur as a crime of passion. Like the murder of Kara, as Ulysses put it. Okay, next, the paintings. There are 3 we see throughout the video. The first we see is one I'm not familiar with a horse painted over the head, flanked by a horse's skull. I have little to say here other than it reminds me of the constant juxtaposition of life and death in a killing game. Also, the presence of straps on the horse's face drives the idea that this game isn't a true representation of who the cast are, given the stressful and deadly environment they're in. The second one is a defacing of the creation of Adam, wherein the figure for God has his head replaced with a goat. It's very easy to see that this represents Tozu and is very much in line with the grandiose and despotic self-image he has. Furthermore, the people surrounding this Tozu stand and have their eyes crossed out, perhaps showing them refusing to acknowledge his presence, or that Tozu chooses to act alone in exercising his will. Then, while Adam himself is not visible, it's possible to make out what appears to be swords thrusted through him, as if to say those made in Tozu's image or under his watch will invariably suffer a grisly fate. Then there's the last one. Oh god. We see 2 women, one with a panther-like mask and another with a crow mask, which is reminiscent of a plague doctor's mask, honestly. Seems familiar? There's also the subtle presence of the academy itself in the background. The woman with the crow's head, Eva, stares at it from the window, while the woman with the panther mask, Mera, refuses to acknowledge it. This way it symbolizes how these 2, people I believe have been most scorned by the UTP, confront the nature of the killing game. Mera, fueled by rage and a desire for revenge, refuses to acknowledge the grisly and fruitless nature of the killing game, instead relegating herself to the role of enforcer, idling and sitting by unless needed. Eva, however, despite also being screwed over by the UTP, fully acknowledges the nature of the game, taking it head on, so to speak. In fact, you could say the Plague Doctor's mask represents some ability not to be so easily swayed or infected by the suggestions of the mastermind or killing game, to do what is right regardless. This could also be a way to connect back to the portrait in the tree room. Now, to end off, let's look at the exit. While it isn't a rabbit hole of meaning, the presentation of a deep dark path being the only way out feels as if it gives the impression that the only way to truly escape this killing game, whether or not you win it, is to die. Maybe not even just die, but die first without ever having to acknowledge its legitimacy. Yeah, that's all I have to say. In essence, we're probably getting a new area. The first chapter will see the Fauza classmate torn apart by their hypocrisy and or have Damon grow to at least tolerate his classmates so he can navigate a trial. Tozu's more of a megalomaniac than we expected. Mary and Eva are shown to be people who differ in their view of the killing game despite being in near identical circumstances due to the UTP, and the murder in this case is unlikely to be planned at all. Kind of like Trigger Happy Havoc's first murder in case, actually. See ya! Not exactly a really long video, but a pretty quick video, I'd hope. I don't want this to be too long, so I'm not gonna keep you long. Thank you so much to Nullz. When I was writing this video, immediately after the dev vlog, I was hopping into the discussion channel. Nullz was helping me a lot, making me realize, oh, there's a bunch of details I'm not actually looking at, so thank you for that. I hope you enjoyed it. There's probably some stuff I missed here. Don't worry about it.